Set it up.
All right, welcome everybody. We'll go ahead and start by setting our motivation. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from desire for friends and hatred for enemies. And so take those four immeasurable thoughts and bring in the Tonglen practice that we did last week. So on the in-breath, connecting with suffering and the causes of suffering, that immeasurable compassion. On the out-breath, connect with happiness and the causes of happiness, send love. And just be with those two cycles of taking suffering, giving happiness. With each breath, the negative self-cherishing thought diminishing, the positive cherishing others increasing. And then reinforcing those ideas, bring in refuge and bodhicitta. Sangye chudan sogi chunamla, chanchu padu dani kapsuchi, dagi chunyangi pesonamgi, drola benchi sangye drupasho, sangye chudan sogi chunamla, chanchu padu dani kapsuchi, dagi chunyangi pesonamgi, Drola benchi sangye drupa sho sangye chudon sogi chunamla janchu padu dani kapsuchi dagi chunyengi pesonamki drola benchi sangye drupa sho. Letting that connect. Okay. So this is our last session of Wheel of Sharp Weapons. And for this last session of Wheel of Sharp Weapons, we're going to mainly focus on the wisdom side of the path and looking at some of those teachings on the emptiness of inherent existence. So some of you know this teaching a little, some of you are fairly new to it. So wherever you land, if you're feeling, I guess, unsteady, or if you're feeling a little bit disassociative, or if you're feeling somehow that the way you're relating to the teachings on the emptiness of inherent existence is sliding you into nihilism, know that you've misunderstood. Okay, the teachings on emptiness are not teachings on nihilism. In fact, nihilism is one of the wrong views that we're trying to stay out of. And when we're looking at this particular teaching, we're aiming for the middle way, right? Not falling into eternalism, not falling into nihilism, trying to stay with that understanding of dependent arising and emptiness. But if it's not coming quickly, whether it's because of lack of familiarity or lack of merit, just keep returning to the simplest, coarsest way of understanding it, which is that everything is interdependent. So that's a coarse understanding. There's layers more subtle that will get you closer to the antidote to samsara. But if you're getting muddled, just keep coming back to interdependence, and then we can go from there. Okay, so we'll do a brief review of last time just to make sure I didn't lose anyone in the land of karma, and then we'll shift into some of the other verses and the framing of that. Okay, so last week we finished with teachings on cause and effect, and this was pointed to in verse 31. So verse 31 says, when all our affairs, both religious and worldly, run into trouble and fall into ruin. This is the wheel of sharp weapons returning full circle upon us from wrongs we have done. Till now we have felt cause and effect could be slighted. Hereafter let's practice with patience and strength. So the footnote there is that cause and effect describes the universal law of karma, whereby virtuous actions lead to happiness and non-virtuous actions in suffering. So the idea is that when your plans don't work, when your plans fail, even though you've done all of the externally practical things, this isn't saying that you can just make something out of nothing. But when you've made good plans, you have solid logistics, you've got good logic, you've really planned things well, and it just doesn't work, just doesn't come together, either in your kind of worldly outside life or in your inner practice or any combination therein. It's because in the past you've neglected the law of cause and effect, and you've allowed your ethics to slide. So this is the wheel of sharp weapons returning. And when that wheel of sharp weapons returns, you try and think of it as an invitation, or like a mindfulness bell, or a gentle slap on the cheek, but it's wake up, do something different. Wake up. This wheel of sharp weapons, you don't want to keep returning. You don't want it to keep behaving like a boomerang. So what is the way to process not getting what you want? Even when what you want is a good thing, how do you process not getting what you want? Now, hereafter, let's practice with patience and strength, which sounds simple and obvious, but patience from a Buddhist perspective is like forbearance or non-reactivity with hardships, with suffering, with the things that could lead to anger, right? You're using suffering differently, and you're choosing not to be reactive. And then the strength, this could be something that points to joyous effort. So one of the ways of supporting joyous effort is through the four forces or through these powers of healthy confidence, healthy pride, not afflicted pride. And developing this kind of strength and this kind of courage, you kind of reorient yourself differently. You kind of get back on the saddle in a different way because you're viewing your thwarted plans under this big picture heading of my vision remains. If the immediate things don't play out, it's not in the flow right now. It's okay. It doesn't mean my big picture goals aren't relevant or worthy or able to be achieved. I just need to pivot. I need to refresh. And just kind of keeping that big picture allows for a type of strength and courage, which is different than just like pushing through, yeah, or having resistance and being reactive and angry. So when we're looking at the law of karma, we won't go through all of them, but looking at the results of karma, because this is really where we're talking in the Wheel of Sharp Weapons, we have the ripening result, which is the body and mind we will take in the future. So this body and this mind we have right now are inherited. Yeah, this is our inheritance from our previous self. So if we protected life and we valued life and we were careful with life, then we have a body that doesn't have too much illness or too much pain. If our mind is relatively steady, if our ability to process information is pretty fluid and clear and flexible, and we have a lot of intelligence, that's something that we've inherited from our past life, having been familiar with these sort of concepts before. So it doesn't come out of nowhere, and it's not like, I don't know, random, right? It's not random or given to you by your parents. And I think when we look at the ripening result of karma, it's easy to kind of go into a psychological schema and think we are who we are because of nature and because of nurture. And that is true on one level. Yeah, on one level, that is certainly true. And things about us have been very much reinforced by our genetics, our physical environment, our parents, our upbringing. Of course, that's true. But what did you come in with? Yeah, we think of little babies as this sort of like fresh, innocent, blank slate. but they come in preloaded like little ticking time bombs. Yes, we were a little ticking time bomb carrying karma from the past, and what got awoken and what ripened is many factors coming together, not just our environment, not just how we were brought up. So it's looking at a layer more subtle. What you do with this information is you think, what do I want to give my future self? What do I want to bestow on this mental continuum? What habits do I want to keep? What kind of body do I want to have? Do I want a strong, healthy body, which can help me access the spiritual path more easily? Or do I want the same aches and pains and random illnesses and grievances that I have now? Right? Obviously not. So protect life. Yeah, does this sort of make sense? The way to view this particular teaching? The other ones were really about behaviors that you experience and behaviors you have the habit to do. And so if they're behaviors that you keep experiencing from others, your first step is always to ask, do I continue to create the causes for this? So if people are always critical towards you, or they don't believe you even when you're telling the truth, or they don't take you seriously when you're saying something important, your first question is, do I do that to other people? Yeah. Do I do that to other people? And if you don't, well done, right? You're not creating more causes, but you've got old stuff that is yet to finish. So you can proactively purify, and you can also, in a way, be happy of the Wheel of Sharp Weapons returning, because it's like passive purification. Yeah, it's finishing negative karma. And if you don't respond poorly to that, you're not creating any new. So the causally concordant behavioral effect, I think, is the most important for us to look at, because it's talking in terms of habits. Habits are hard to change, but there is no chance to change a habit unless you have self-awareness. Yeah, so self-awareness is key to all of this. And then we have the environmental result. So our experience of the environment and climate where we live. So there is the like literal outside environment and climate where we live, which is the result of karma also, collective karma. But then there's our individual experience, which is how we experience it. Yeah. So right now in Portland, Oregon, it's finally sunny and toasty. And whether we like that or not has been very there's been mixed opinions amongst the coworkers today, right? Some people are too hot. Some people are so happy. Some people wish it could warm up a little more, but it's the same temperature for all of us. But we're experiencing it differently because of our karma. Yes, and our bodies, which came from karma, right? And our parents and our genetics, et cetera, et cetera. So, what do you make of all of this teachings on karma? Do you kind of land on things are not so simple? I will not get to the bottom of it with anything. Maybe the answer is some sort of grace, some sort of compassion, some sort of flexibility. Or do you get aggravated and think, no, I must get to the bottom of every single thing? How do you respond to the teachings on karma? Yeah, does it feel some sort of ring of truth? Do you feel resistance anywhere?
It reinforces for me. I made an observation. I was with a friend, and there was a photographer, and for a paper, and he looked so grim and unhappy.
Yeah.
And my friend and I are the cheery kind of folks. And I said, Chris, I think you and I came out of the womb going, wahoo, we're here. This poor guy came out going, oh God, not again. Yeah.
Like Eeyore.
Yes, definitely. And it does. It seems like people kind of come in with a certain scenario. It's amazed me and made me sad because it's so hard to change that scenario if they want to. So, yeah, so that's my observation.
Yeah, and it's an important one. And, if you think about your own childhood, it's important to think about what are the ways in which you were different than your family. Yeah. And the ways in which you were different from your family were either celebrated or hated or ignored. There was a response to that difference, but you had a difference. Why would there be a difference unless you came in with something? And so, for example, I was thinking of how I used to be very attached to the ant colony, in the alleyway, but in my backyard when I was little. And I loved the ants. And I made stories about the ants and their village and what they got up to. And I named them and I insisted I could tell them apart, even though that was a big lie. I could not tell them apart, but I would insist to my parents, no, that one's not that one. That one's that one. That's George. You thought it was Sam. I'd be very insistent about it. Um, so it was something that I came in with this real recognition of their sentience. And my parents were a little bit amused and they're sort of indulgent and they're like, that's cute, kid, whatever. Anyway, try not to get bit. But then the neighbor poured gasoline down the anthill and lit it on fire. And I was devastated. It was like there'd been a massacre. And I was so sad and just bereft, like inconsolable. And my parents' response to that was, oh, for goodness sake, it's just ants, which is a totally normal response, right? From a worldly person, a non-Dharma person. But that had an effect, right? So I came in with this like beautiful, sweet little compassionate heart that loved all creatures. And it was somewhat indulged, but I could tell they thought I was weird. But then when push came to shove, they told me it was wrong, basically, by their response. Yeah, when the ants were killed and their response being, ugh, it's just ants, get over it. So what that meant was that for many years, I had to pretend to be harder than I was. Yeah, I had to kind of shield my little sweetie heart, and I had to be a little bit cynical in my affect or a little jaded, and came to think of cynicism and jadedness as being akin to a type of wisdom, which is not true, of course. But it's like if you're not worldly, then you must be stupid, and all sorts of those messages kind of started to have a foothold. And there came a time when I was just fully punk kind of kid with all sorts of piercings and crazy hair and tattoos and all of those things and a hardness. And then I had to train myself out of that hardness because it wasn't serving. So we have a story like that, right? Each one of us have a story where we came in with something that was either hated or celebrated or ignored. And other people's response to that changed our relationship to it. But that didn't mean it was gone. Yeah. And so now we ask ourselves as adults, what did we put aside because of conditioning that actually we could let reawaken and develop? What was something that was weird about us that was actually very cool as well? Some little sweet part of you that got covered over because no one understood or supported it. What can you let yourself experience now that has your adult wisdom with it? And then the next question is, how do you carry it with you in the most skillful way? And I often think about this with the spiritual path, that if you treat the spiritual path like a chore or a job or a burden that you have to do to be a good person, you might get some good work done, but in your next life, you're going to have this relationship to it that feels like a chore, which will trigger some sort of resistance. You might not want to do it. So if it's not keeping a flexibility and a curiosity and a collaborative sort of vibe, if it doesn't have a playfulness and an inspiringness to it, will you want to keep doing it? When you come into your next life, say you don't have supportive parents, will you keep the seed of it until you meet with good conditions, or will it die and fade away? So thinking about your habits in terms of legacy planning. Yeah, what is the legacy I'm leaving myself? What is the legacy I'm leaving in the relationships I leave behind when I die? The ways of modeling healthy communication, the ways of modeling like not allowing divisive speech in our area, right? What are we leaving in terms of a legacy becomes the real big question as an individual for all of us when we look at karma. So how does that land? What do you feel about all of this karma talk?
Can I ask a question?
Sure, yeah, please.
Yeah. Um, so I think I really do find uh the discussion of karma to be very convincing to me, but I think I get stuck on this idea of we get this rebirth, but there is no self.
Mhm.
So I'm just trying to we're all sort of dependently originating. So what actually is moving on to the next life? I
Yeah,
think I get stuck on this idea of like, because I don't think we have a soul that moves on to the next life. So what is it? So
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that is the correct question. That is the question to have, absolutely. And the technical answer may or may not be satisfying, so we'll see. Okay, so the technical answer is that it's your continuum of consciousness that carries the karmic seeds and predispositions. The continuum of consciousness. So think of the continuum of consciousness like a river. And when a river passes from one country to another and crosses a border, sometimes it gets a new name. Just like we get a new name when our consciousness moves from one body to another. But there's a continuity there. And so if there was pollution down in this part of the country and now it's going down through into the next country, there's still some results of that pollution downstream. So are we polluting the stream? Are we cleaning the stream? That will have a positive or negative effect of when it crosses the border to our next life. So the body is easy. The body is what you know about the body from science. It came from the sperm and the egg of our parents. Our consciousness entered into it. That consciousness that entered into it is not inherently existent, but it does relatively exist. Yeah, it's not that there's no self whatsoever, it's that there's no inherently existent self.
Mhm.
So that is a subtle distinction that we're really going to need to roll around in our mind for a while before there's places for it to land. But if you're thinking of it in terms of river, that can help. Because if you point to the river and say, that's the river, you know that's an exaggeration. Because whatever you point to is a little ripple or a little section. Yeah, but from a distance, it's easy enough to name it. Just like for us, right? From distance, you can say this is Yönten or this is Yönten's body. The closer you get, the more it's just a part, and you can't find the substantial Yönten, right? You point, there she is. No, that's her collarbone. Right? And you're like, oh, there's the collarbone. You point to the collarbone. No, that's some skin covering it. Oh, there's a bone. Oh, there's marrow. Oh, there's blood. Like from a distance, you can label things and it's not problematic. But the closer you get, the more it becomes unfindable, which doesn't mean
Yeah.
it's not
Yeah.
there.
Right. I was wondering too if because we're interdependent, when we think about emptiness, you use that word interdependent, and we're all sort of dependently arising. Does that mean there's like a collective karma? Like, you know, there's not sort of one single self going on to the next life. We're all kind of connected. Does that mean we kind of are going together? Or there are streams of consciousness or continuum that kind of are flowing together or
Yeah, I mean, ish, right? Like it's not like there's just one big giant self. It's not like that. And it's not like there's like the ether or the collective consciousness or Jungian stuff.
yeah.
It's not quite like that. But it's like all of our individual consciousnesses are responding and interacting so fundamentally that it's a lot harder to divide this is mine and this is yours than how it seems in the physical world. Like I can say this is my mind and its thoughts, but my thoughts are already informed by the fact that you just asked that question. So whose are they? You know? And the temperature of the room and what I just ate and the fact I just took a sip of coffee at 4:30 in the afternoon and that's problematic. Like, like it's not like my thoughts came from one thing, but they are here and they're mine loosely. Yeah, but the way in which we're interdependent is really useful to play with because you think, yeah, these are my thoughts. I made them myself. 2 seconds of analysis, you're like, wait, I wouldn't have these thoughts if you hadn't asked that question. Yeah. So whose are they? Yeah. So it's something like that where you're trying to loosen up the concrete feeling You're trying to loosen up the feeling of self-sufficient, substantially existent. You're trying to create a flexibility that acknowledges that there is no fundamental independence with anything. Nothing is self-created. Yeah. And yet we have responsibility for our own karma, but you don't attribute fault to the mistakes you've made. You don't attribute praise to your triumphs. You think, dependently arisen, I made a mistake. I'm the one that will have to wear the responsibility for that. It's not my fault. It's my responsibility. Yeah. And this wonderful thing that I've done, and this way I was helpful here and nice there, that's great, but it's not mine. It makes no sense to have pride about it because all sorts of dependent arising came together for me to be able to do it. You know, so you're just quietly acknowledging, oh, that was a mistake, do less of that. Oh, that was useful, do more of that. But you're not having this like tight identification.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Thank you for asking. Yep. So karma rides on the continuum of consciousness, the subtle consciousness that goes from life to life. Short answer. Yeah. So, you know, just kind of to like get us grounded in the worldview, there are two wings of practice in Buddhism. There's the method wing and the wisdom wing, and that's what takes us to Buddhahood. So it's the union of method and wisdom is central to understanding and practicing the path to complete enlightenment, Buddhahood. We need both. So far, we've been talking mainly method, okay? So method refers to the altruistic deeds of a bodhisattva, including the cultivation of compassion and the awakening mind, bodhicitta. You know, so compassion, loving kindness, tonglen, patience, all those clear and obvious good things that we all value, that all falls under the category of method. Then wisdom, the Sanskrit term is prajna, and in Tibetan it's sherab, have different applications depending on the context. So in the context of the Mahayana path, our tradition of Buddhism, prajna refers to the wisdom aspect of the path constituted primarily by deep insight into the emptiness of all phenomena. So to say the emptiness of all phenomena is to say their lack or their absence of inherent existence. So all the practices of that type fall under the genre or the practice or the wing of wisdom. So last week we talked about we can minimize or purify negative karma from ripening as suffering. One of the ways to do that is through the Vajrasattva practice, which a lot of you know about, and that uses the four opponent powers. So you develop that refuge that we do at the beginning of every class. You generate a mind of regret about the mistake that you made without over-identification. And then you apply a remedy, some sort of energy that stands in direct opposition to the mistake. So you just, I don't know, bug bombed your house, now go rescue a bunch of bait worms, or do the Vajrasattva visualization and mantra. And then you do the power of resolve, which is practical promise, how to be different in the future. Something small, something manageable. So that's one way, but the other way is through the wisdom realizing emptiness. That is actually the most direct way to purify negative karma, to prevent it from ripening as suffering. Yeah, so this Vajrasattva is mainly the method side of the path. Okay, so how do you meditate on emptiness? The shortest way is to meditate on what's called the three spheres: agent, action, object. All right, so this is the wisdom side of the path, and this is where we'll go with the rest of Wheel of Sharp Weapons. So agent, action, object. All right, the agent of any action lacks inherent existence because it dependently arises. So say I stole a pen from the bank. It wasn't one of the free pens. It was like the bank teller's pen. It belonged to them, right? I ripped it off the chain. Okay, I have not done that, but you know, say I did that. Okay, so I am the agent of stealing. I lack inherent existence because I dependently arouse. Okay, what does that mean in this context? being the agent of harm, the agent of the mistake? Well, it means that I didn't steal the pen independently. Yeah, there had to be a pen there to steal. There had to be a sense of deprivation of pen in my mind. I had to feel bereft of pens. I really, really needed a pen. There also had to be something in my conditioning that thought stealing was okay. Yeah, there was some sort of entitlement that thought, oh, this doesn't matter, but I deserve it. There had to be all sorts of things coming together for me to be the agent of stealing. So I am empty of inherently existing because I dependently arise. The action of stealing, lacks inherent existence because it dependently arises. I have to have hands, right, in order to enact that action. There has to be access. There has to be so many things for the action to happen. There has to be a mind animating this hand, et cetera, et cetera. The object, the pen, yeah, that doesn't exist from its own side, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's very basic with something like stealing the pen from the bank, but when it's someone who has harmed you, this is very useful for clearing your sense of rage, your sense of victimization, your sense of perpetrator. It really loosens the whole thing up. So let's workshop it, okay? So say someone in your family told you that you were a loser. Yeah, someone you really love, who normally speaks to you very sweetly, says you are a loser, and they said it with conviction. That's a horrible thing to say, right? It's horrible, especially from someone you love and trust. And so naturally, you're going to feel agitated. You're going to be mad or sad or bewildered, right? That's what your response would be if someone you love told you that. Mad, sad, bewildered. Yes, basically anger, attachment, ignorance, right? One of the three poisons would arise. And then you think, they gave me this feeling, right? That's what we think, right? They gave me this feeling. Did they? Where exactly was the wound? Where exactly was the arrow? Was it the words? Was it the tone? Was it the timing? Was it the source? Where was it exactly where the wound was made? Yeah. Can you actually point to only one thing and say, that is why I feel pain? If you say it was the words they said, well, if those words inherently gave you pain, anyone saying them would affect you the same way. Someone with a developmental disability, someone with a mental health issue that you didn't know, shouting on the street, saying those same things would have the same effect. So you think, no, it was the fact that so-and-so said it, this person that I love said it. That's why it gave me pain from their side to me. No, because what if you knew that that day they had had a terrible experience at work? What if you found out it was part of a big practical joke? What if you found out this backstory or this backstory or this backstory? Suddenly they could say it exactly the same way and it lands completely differently. Yeah. And what if all negative behavior came from afflictions and suffering? Because guess what? That is where they come from. It doesn't seem like it in the moment when someone is sort of, I don't know, has a diabolical laugh of wanting to wound you. But there is a deep ignorance there that thinks that that will lead to some sort of satisfaction and happiness for them long term. And all it will do is give them a moment. Yeah. And then lead to so much pain in the future. So looking at the lack of inherently existent agent, action, and object really means looking for the context behind all stories so that the story becomes less simplistic, less villain and hero. No one is really the villain, no one is really the hero in any story, but our ignorance makes it seem so, and makes it seem obviously so, and then makes our emotions feel inevitable. When a terrible action from someone could just as easily be the catalyst for compassion once we've retrained the mind. And from that place of compassion, you might actually address the harmful behavior more skillfully because you're not so agitated. Yeah, you've got more creativity accessible to you. So it's tricky, this one. It's very tricky, but it's interesting to, like, here's the simple way of trying to understand emptiness, and then we can use the poetic ways. But just to kind of give you a bit more on the worldview, in Buddhism, we frame things in terms of basis, path, and result. So basis is like Buddhist science, Buddhist philosophy, and it's just describing the way things exist. Relative truth, ultimate truth, right? Relative truth is the way phenomena are misapprehended by ordinary beings due to ignorance. Ultimate truth is all phenomena being empty of inherent existence. So when you see the two truths, conventional and ultimate, what you're looking is not for two types of truth. You're asking, true for who? True for who? Yeah, there's relative truth, which is true for people who have not developed the wisdom realizing emptiness, right? So it's an obscure truth. It's workable, but it's not the way things are. Ultimate truth is true for people who have realized emptiness directly while they're in meditation on emptiness directly. So don't think of the two truths as two truths out there. There is just truth, but true for who? Someone with a veil, someone without a veil. Someone with ignorance, someone who is working through their ignorance. True for who? Does that make sense? So the basis is just describing phenomena, right? This is why people think Buddhism is just a philosophy and not a religion, is that they're just looking at the category of the basis. But there's more to the story for full-fledged Buddhists. There is the path and the result. So the path and the result are, what do you do with that information? What do you do with the fact that right now, all we can perceive is relative truth, right? And we know that the truth we perceive is deceptive. It has the veil of ignorance. It has this aspect of casting a sense of inherent existence that isn't there. There's a superimposition over everything. Yeah. So what do you do with that information? You practice the practices related to method. And then wisdom is practices related to ultimate truth. And you know you don't see ultimate truth yet, but you know the intellectual idea. So you can practice under the influence of your intellectual understanding, which will lead to a direct understanding. And it's that very process of analysis that brings you there. So we've got the path, the wings, so method, practices such as loving kindness, wisdom, practices to realize emptiness. Are you with me so far? Do you want to ask anything about those two? I know I'm going a bit fast, but it's just kind of an overview or a summary of this topic. Okay so far? Okay, yep, nice one, great. Okay, so then the kayas are the bodies. So we've got the rupa kayas, the form bodies, and the dharma kayas, the wisdom bodies. And so right now we're just looking at, because of the basis, we practice the path. Once you've practiced the path, the result you achieve is Buddhahood, but Buddhahood refers to collections of qualities or bodies of qualities that we use to benefit others and to benefit ourselves. Okay, so we're in the path, the two wings. So method, here we're talking about the practice of relative or conventional bodhicitta. Wisdom, we're talking about the practice of ultimate or absolute bodhicitta in the context of Wheel of Sharp Weapons. Okay, so relative bodhicitta is what you know to be bodhicitta, the main Mahayana motivation with two aspirations: to become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings. And these aspirations become a main mind or primary consciousness through study, deep conviction, repetition, and meditations. This is how you move this altruistic heart into something that is so stable that it's always there spontaneously. So in Wheel of Sharp Weapons, verse 46 says, in short, then whenever unfortunate sufferings we haven't desired crash upon us like thunder, this is the same as the smith who had taken his life with a sword he had fashioned himself. Our sufferings, the wheel of sharp weapons, returning full circle upon us from wrongs we have done. Hereafter, let's always have care and awareness, never to act in non-virtuous ways. All of the sufferings we have endured and the lives we have led in the 3 lower states, as well as our pains of the present and future, are the same as the case of the forger of arrows, who later was killed by an arrow he'd made. Our sufferings, the wheel of sharp weapons, returning full circle upon us from wrongs we have done. Hereafter, let's always have care and awareness, never to act in non-virtuous ways. So these are the verses that the genre of verses that you're already familiar with. These are describing method. So method, I think we get, generally speaking. Now we're moving to wisdom. So wisdom practices to realize the emptiness of inherent existence. Here's where we talk about absolute bodhicitta. So it's the same bodhicitta, but in the mind of someone who has realized emptiness directly or perceptually. Sometimes people make a shortcut and they say ultimate bodhicitta is emptiness, and they're going in the right direction, and that's kind of a shorthand that you'll find. But really what we're saying is absolute bodhicitta is that same Mahayana motivation to become enlightened, to benefit all sentient beings, but it's for someone who's already understood reality directly. So, Wheel of Sharp Weapons, verse 106, there is nothing substantial to anyone's life force. It crumbles apart like a water-soaked log. And there is nothing substantial to anyone's lifespan. It bursts in an instant like bubbles of foam. All the things of this world are but fog-like appearance. When closely examined, they fade out of sight. Like mirages, these things at a distance seem lovely, but when we come closer, they are not to be found. All things are like images found in a mirror, and yet we imagine they are real, very real. All things are like mist or like clouds on a mountain, and yet we imagine they are stable and firm. Our foe, our insistence on ego identities truly our own, which we wish were secure, and our butcher, the selfish concern for ourselves. Like all things, these appear to be truly existent, though they never had been truly existent at all. Okay, so let's take the example of images in a mirror. This is a really good example, because when you look in the mirror, it seems like there's a face there, yes? You look in the mirror and you're like, yeah, face, that's my face, I see my face. And for us, as humans, we do not believe that we have suddenly replicated and made into 2 people, and now there's a whole other you looking through the glass. You don't think there's a whole other person there, not for a second, right? That would be embarrassing, right? I mean, if you're really tired or you don't have your glasses on, maybe, but like you don't think there's a whole other person there when you look in the mirror. But a cat does sometimes. Yeah, have you put your cat in front of the mirror? They sometimes think it's another cat and they want to attack it or play with it, or they're like really confused and they don't want to look at it and they sort of turn away. Have you seen animals with mirrors? They don't quite get it. Yeah, that's how we are with reality. Yeah, it's like believing the appearance. We believe the appearance. And what we want to be able to do is to see the way we see our face in the mirror, which is, it does appear to be that way, but I know it's not that way. It does appear that there's a whole other face there, but I know that's not a whole other face there. It's a reflection. Yeah. Right now, we're like the animal. Yeah, where we just believe appearances. We don't even consider there's more to the story. We don't consider there's a veil over our perceptions. So this is the analogy used a lot. And I guess it's a good way of understanding what it will be like once we realize emptiness, but we're not a Buddha yet. Once we've realized emptiness, we will only see emptiness while we're meditating. We will see this, mere negation, this vacuity like an autumn dawn, clear and spacious. We'll have a natural non-dual experience. It will be blissful and radiant. There will be no chance for identification and the arising of afflictions and negative karma while we're in meditation. And then when we're out of meditation, things are going to look the way they always looked. They're going to seem the way they've always seemed, but the spell is broken. Yeah. So we're not going to believe the appearance anymore. We're not going to be the animal looking in the mirror. We're going to be the human looking in the mirror. Yeah. So things will appear to be truly existent, but we won't believe for a second that they are. Yeah. Which will fundamentally change your behaviors and change your mood and change the way you relate to others. Hurting someone will be like the hand punching the shoulder. It won't make any sense because you're connected. You know that the hand is not the shoulder, but it makes no sense to hit your shoulder because you understand it's part of a system and that it's fundamentally connected. So you won't hurt each other because you'll have that same understanding that we are as connected as the hand is to the shoulder. You with me so far? Yeah? What do you think? Do you like it? I don't know. Too soon to say. It's an interesting thing to think about, like how would you live if the spell was already broken? Because if you live in the way where you imagine, it gets closer. Yeah, what if things are not the way they appear? What if things are not so simple? What if no one is fundamentally hero or villain? What if, yeah, because we know that's the case, even just without Buddhism, just basic analysis of life. But you're doing this basic analysis of life under the influence of realizing it's having looked the other way, that all your mistakes have been made by thinking that you are inherently existent and that other people are and that situations and objects are. You're forever in push and pull. Come closer, things that support me and love me and nourish me. Get away from me, things that hurt me. But how absurd would that be if you said to the shoulder, the hand wants you to get away, and you keep pushing your shoulder away with your hand. Get away from me, I don't like you. It makes no sense. Or you're like, oh, shoulder, you're my best friend. That shoulder's crap, this shoulder's good. Come be closer. That also makes no sense. That's crazy. Yeah. But this is how we are in life, is there's this push and pull, which really just shakes ourself. So we're in this constant state of mild to moderate agitation, which sometimes escalates into really coarse afflictions that are obvious, like getting obsessed or like getting anxious or like getting boiling mad. But even when we don't have a big affliction, we're shaking. We're always, this is too much, this is not enough. I want more of you, I want less of you. Always. Yeah, whether it's in words in our mind or not, there is a little push or a little pull. Do you agree? Yes, Nate, go ahead.
So I was like, in theory, this idea of interdependence, like science, everybody agrees, and there's no, at least for me, any dissonance around the idea. But then, when we use examples like you were doing about the parts of the body and stuff, then it becomes like still so radical. Like in theory, great. I understand, we breathe in the same oxygen and we all come from stardust. But
Yeah.
in practice, you are you and I'm me. And, it's still like so difficult to change really when I look at people, to see that deep connection.
Yeah, it is. And you have to do it on purpose in ways that feel a little absurd. And you don't need to go too far too fast. You can just look at influence. If you're not ready to look at full interdependence or complete lack of inherent existence, you can still say, I am Yönten and you're Sneh, and that is true. And yet there is an influence we're having on each other, which is informing our experience of ourselves. And the way in which we're influencing each other is influenced by still other things, right? Like the fact that I have a natural fondness for you and I like it when you ask questions isn't because you're a magically insightful person from your own side. Sure you are, I know, but it's like, it's because I came in with a conditioning that appreciates a certain kind of communication style, which was learned from countless other experiences, remembered and unremembered. It's the fact that we speak the same language. It's the fact that we're, in this place and time that we both like Dharma and are in the mood for this conversation. If we had met on a bus, would we have the same influence or not? Because it's not the right scenario. Would we have the same fondness, or would different things ripen? It feels like things are so obviously just as they are, but if you can push back a little bit on appearances of who is in charge here or what is driving here, then it will dissolve into there is no core, which is not to say there is nothing. Yeah, it's like this web of interdependence. And we're choosing to kind of isolate one little part of the web and say that's the boss, but it's no more the boss than anything else. And if you lift up one part of the net, it influences all the other parts of the net. So you use easy, absurd examples like the hand and the shoulder because it's obvious and intellectually makes sense, but then you have to immediately apply it to your experience of your own identity. Why do we highlight what we highlight? Why do we identify with what we identify with? Why do we feel closeness for some and distance to others? It feels only natural, but natural just means habitual. And that habit came from ignorance and was reinforced probably by suffering. So it's so important whenever you're having a very solid sense of separateness to look for where exactly is the line. Yeah. Leo?
Hello, good evening.
Hey.
Yeah, like let me just say that this genre is so triggering to me,
Yeah.
but because it's very challenging to contemplate all this, but at the same time, it's wonderful. And my question is about the middle way in all this, like becoming able to see more clearly the nature of your actions, the exact point between pure motivation or in bodhicitta and self-cherishing. So
Yeah.
this is so challenging because there are times when we are certain we have a pure motivation, and in the end, it's just another ego trip. And other times we are in complete symphony with our body, speech, mind, and actions. And you feel that that action is really for the benefit of the other. And they just don't see this, they completely distort it. So this is, for me, it's really challenging this. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. And honestly, the very fact that you do that questioning means you're moving in the right direction, and I think that it's rather than try and figure out when your motivation is pure, assume it never is. Right? Assume it never is, because right now we haven't realized emptiness directly. Right now, self-cherishing is our default setting, and self-grasping keeps reinforcing it, and self-cherishing reinforces it, and they're like best friends, these twin demons. And what it needs to do is kind of loosen up your expectations of yourself and of others. Because if your motivation's never pure, then so too everyone else. And then immediately the tendency to attachment is gone. Yeah, when people are sweet and kind and useful to you, you don't think they're somehow seeing primordial you, valuing it perfectly and wanting to support and uplift it. That might be there, sort of, but also there's something in it for them. You're being like a little cynical in a healthy way. Not too far, don't get jaded. But it's like, because they have Buddha nature, they have a good heart, they have compassion, and they're trying to move towards their potential just as we are towards ours. But the habits, man, the habits of self-cherishing are so strong. So it's more in terms of, think of it like the volume knob on an old stereo. Yeah, turn the volume of your self-cherishing down. Yeah, assume it's up because that's its default setting as soon as you turn it on, right? Yeah, just like when you wake up in the morning, the default setting is self-cherishing. And then you consciously turn the volume down and say, shh, I cannot hear my wisdom, you're too loud. Yeah, I cannot hear my good heart, you're too loud. And then you actively engage, the purpose of my life is to benefit sentient beings. In order to benefit sentient beings, I must tame my own mind. Therefore, I'm getting out of bed. Yeah, therefore I'm brushing my teeth. Therefore. And all of that will have a positive impact on this mental continuum. There is something in it for me, but what's in it for me has an immediate positive impact on others. And that feedback loop is healthy. So you're not saying all sentient beings accept me, right? You're just putting you in the correct proportion. Right now it's me first, then everyone else. It should be everyone else, which includes also me. You know, it's like outward focused first, and then you're kind of like holding the whole, knowing you're one piece of it. And you have to sort of maintain this piece with a little bit more energy. You don't have to feed all sentient beings. You only had to feed yourself and your children, right? But, you know, the way in which you're focusing on life, you're consciously expanding whenever you can, or consciously turning the volume down on self-cherishing whenever you can. Really feel like it's one of those old radios that will just jump up to its original setting whenever it's turned on, and you have to consciously turn it down every time. Whatever.
That was so helpful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and the, you know, the honesty and the clarity of the self-awareness will get us all far. So it's going in the right direction if you're at least awake to yourself, which you are. So like that. So all of this is going to lead to the actualization of our full potential, our Buddha nature. So because of the basis, we practice the path. The result is the kayas, or the bodies. And the form bodies, enjoyment and emanation, these are the result of having practiced method. These are the result of having practiced loving kindness and compassion and all of these good warm things. Enjoyment bodies can only be seen by people that have realized emptiness, but emanation bodies can be observed by anyone. So we have connected to Buddha bodies or emanation bodies, nirmanakayas, but we might not have recognized it because they can manifest as ordinary people with ordinary behavior. They can also manifest as objects like bridges or trains, animals, books. So the Buddhists are going to manifest in whatever way has the chance to move our mind towards the positive. Yeah, they will just do the best they can given our karma. Their ability is incredible, their omniscience is complete, but they can only help us the degree to which we're open and receptive and have the karmic openness. So then the Dharmakayas, or the truth bodies, are the result of having realized emptiness and practiced the wisdom side of the path to its completion. And these are what get you out of suffering. Yeah, these are kind of for your sake. They're the result of the wisdom side. And you don't develop them like one by one, you develop them all at once. But the nature truth body is the fact that the mind lacks inherent existence. And this is called naturally abiding purity. And this you have had from beginningless time. You can never destroy it. You can never end it. This is your Buddha nature, right? And then you must develop it. And once it's fully developed, you will have all four bodies. Okay, so from the practices of method, you get the form bodies. From the practice of wisdom, you get the truth bodies. Okay. So what we want is union of both, right? Eventually. We practice them separately, but eventually get union. So by practicing this way, the two bodhicittas of the ultimate and the conventional truth, and thus by completing without interference collections of insight and merit as well, may all of us quickly attain full enlightenment, granting what we and all others have wished. So that's how it all comes together. Okay, so if we go back to the wings, we're going into the emptiness ones, and they're kind of inviting us to look at illusions in different ways. So 105 says, "O mind," talking to yourself, talking to your mind, "understand that the topics discussed here are interdependent phenomena all, for things must rely on dependent arising to have an existence. They cannot stand alone. The process of change is alluring like magic, for physical form is but mental appearance, as a torch whirling round seems a circle of flame. So, what? Yeah, so it's interesting to kind of think of like when you swirl a torch or when you swirl a stick that you've had in the fire, like you're playing when you're camping, yeah, and you twirl it around in the dark, it looks like a circle. Yeah, even though it's just one stick that's, got some embers on the top. It's just a stick with embers on the top. But when you swirl it around, it looks like a circle in the dark. Yeah. And we get sort of transfixed by it and we get absorbed in it and we're sort of like fascinated with appearances. But what we're trying to recognize is that there was nothing from the side of that image that created that image in and of itself. It dependently arose. It's illusory. So the Wheel of Sharp Weapons verses are really trying to get you into the habit of seeing the illusion as an illusion, not seeing the illusion as something non-existent. That's going into nihilism, that's going too far. So it's keep coming back to it appears that things exist from their own side, or it looks and seems as if everything stands alone independently. That is the way it seems, and that is the opposite of how it exists. You with me so far? Getting there? Getting there, slowly, slowly? We'll do a couple more and then we'll have a stretch and then we'll try and meditate on it, okay? We'll see if we can. Okay, so the way we achieve the perfection of wisdom is through several methods to help us access reality. So there's a few different ways. There's the 3 spheres that we did before, but then there's what's called recognizing the object to be negated, recognizing dependent arising, and understanding the fallacy of belief in inherent existence and the logic of the emptiness of it. So when you're recognizing the object to be negated, the object is the self, and what is to be negated is it having the characteristic of being inherently existent. Okay, so these are technical terms, and I'm using technical terms because I want you to be able to read philosophical texts and to know what they're describing. So we recognize the object of negation through provoking it into prominence by remembering past moments of strong belief in it, then disproving the self's existence in an inherent way through logic. Okay, so this sounds kind of like a mouthful, but what you're really trying to do is to annoy yourself, right? You're trying to annoy yourself or scare yourself or like get pleased in such a way that the feeling of me really arises with a very strong solidness, because that one is the one that doesn't exist at all, even relatively. There is a self, but it's not that one. But that one is where we place so much of our identity, maybe all of our identity. So you keep coming back to that same idea of, okay, hated, celebrated, or ignored for, right? Or imagine someone praises you or belittles you. Doesn't matter, whatever makes the eye flare. But you're trying to provoke it into prominence in the meditation. So you sit and you think, okay, what if the Dalai Lama walked into the room and said, "Oh my goodness, you're amazing." The eye would go, "Oh, I am," or, "Oh, no, I'm not. He's going to find out," but it would arise. Or the Dalai Lama came in and he said, "You are awful. You're terrible. Oh, you're a terrible practitioner. I can't believe it. How can you even call yourself Buddhist? Oh, lost cause." The eye would arise, wouldn't it? It would say, "Hey," or it would say, "I know, you're right." Oh, right. Like the self-pity eye would arise, or the defensive eye would arise, right? Wouldn't something arise? Something combative? Yeah, or something like defeated? That guy. Do you know that guy? Yeah, the one that really sets up the target and can be hit. It's like ready to be wounded. It's ready to be the victim. It's ready to be the hero. It is ready to be the main character. That is the object of negation. Yeah. So when you're sitting quietly and you're relaxed, if someone says something offensive to you, it doesn't always have anywhere to land, and you can kind of roll with it sometimes and be like, oh, that was kind of rude. Are you all right? But if you're really upregulated, if you're really stressed, if you're really tired and someone says something rude to you, then immediately the I is up. Yeah, the me is like, hey, how dare you? That's the one you're looking for. So what you do in these meditations, and we can't do all of them because it's just a short course, but you get it to arise, and then you behave like it's a court drama or a police show, right? And that the object of negation is the perp. Yeah, it's the perp. And then you've got good cop and bad cop, right? Can you picture the scene? We watch too much Law and Order? No, you know what I'm talking about? Okay. So you've got that I that feels so solid. And then your analysis comes in like a good cop and says, oh, it's only fair that you feel this way. Of course you do. Of course you do. Yep, don't worry, don't worry. Feel safe, don't run away. And then the bad cop, which is actually the best one, says, all right, if you exist the way you appear to, prove it. And then it collapses. Yeah. So you don't want it to collapse too soon. You want that feeling to be stable enough to find and examine. And you have to come in stealthily and really poke it. And then what'll happen is you realize that that kind of self is impossible to exist. The only self that does exist is that which is merely labeled on the collection of parts or on the aggregates, the body-mind. Yeah. And anything more than that is an exaggeration. Any identification on top of that is what's leading to afflictions and suffering and bad behavior and negative karma, etc. Yeah. So that's one of the first strategies when you start to meditate on emptiness is first, you have to find the object of negation. The object of negation is the self that seems to inherently exist, because that one isn't there at all. Then you look at dependent arising. And so we'll do this one as our meditation. But first we'll read it and then we'll have a break. Okay, so when we closely examine effects and their causes, we see that they both lack inherent existence. They can't stand alone, either whole or apart. Yet there seem to exist independently rising and falling events, which in fact are conditioned by various forces, components, and parts. It is this very level on which we experience birth and our death and whatever life brings. So please, in this world of appearances only, let's always be sure that what we do is a virtue and shun all those acts that would cause us great pain. When a vase has been filled by the dropping of water, the first drops themselves did not fill it alone, nor was it made full by the last several drops. It was filled by an interdependent collection of causes and forces that came all together: the water, the pourer, the vase, and such things. Okay. So this one refers to what's called the king of reasons, which is basically that all phenomena, people, situations, objects, are empty of inherent existence because they dependently arise. So that's the meditation we'll do. So let's just take 5 and have a little stretch, grab some water if you need to, and we'll be back in 5 minutes. Okay. So we'll do a meditation on dependent arising, and we'll do it with analytical style meditation. And when we do this, don't feel like you need to rush to an answer. Just really play with the power of an open question and just kind of see where your wisdom leads you. And just, kind of stay out of the two extremes, right? Stay out of nihilism, stay out of eternalism, and see if you can play in that space. Curious, how do things exist, particularly the self? Okay. So take a minute and just settle into your posture. Nice straight back. And just let the body settle to that feeling of soft front. Nothing clenched, nothing held in. Strong, stable back. Then think, my motivation for doing this meditation is in order to understand reality more clearly, so that I live more skillfully and eventually develop my fullest potential. Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. And with that motivation, start with the general idea. Just this general statement that all phenomena are empty of inherent existence because they dependently arise. And just let your mind explore the impact of that statement. What does it mean to you? How does it resonate? Dependently, not independently. Dependently, not inherently, not truly, not in and of themselves, not out of nowhere from nothing, but dependently, phenomena arise. So they depend on causes and conditions in order to arise and function. All phenomena are dependently arisen. In particular, impermanent phenomena depend on causes, the substantial cause, and conditions, those supportive factors. Just like this body, substantial cause, the materials from our physical parents, the sperm and egg, and the coactive conditions, the food, the air, the elements. And all permanent and impermanent phenomena depend on parts and whole, as well as context, in order to arise. This small room is only small within the context of what I label big. I can only say self in contrast to other. I can only say whole in dependence upon parts of it. And to be parts of something, there has to be a whole that it's the parts of. Both directions. And all permanent and impermanent phenomena depend on mind's imputation on a valid basis. There has to be a mind that labels. There has to be a valid basis upon which to label. In terms of worldly convention, in terms of valid cognition, I can't label a table as an elephant. I can't label the eye as the nose, or the nose as the ear. There has to be a valid basis. But we don't leave it at that. We add. That's a good ear. That's a bad table. We add. That's mine. That's yours. We add. I need. I want. We add and elaborate and elaborate. All of that elaboration is exaggeration. Although they, phenomena, the people, appear to be concrete and real, they have never been real, anytime, anywhere. They're not the things we should burden with ultimate value, nor should we deny them their relative truth. As our grasping for egos and love for ourselves lacks substantial foundations with true independence, how can they yield acts that exist by themselves? And then how can this cruel, vicious circle of suffering, the fruit of these actions, be real from its core? Although all things thus lack inherent existence, yet just as the face of the moon can be seen in a cup of clear water reflecting its image, the various aspects of cause and effect appear in this relative world as reflections. So please, in this world of appearances only, let's always be sure what we do is of virtue and shun all those acts that would cause us great pain. When musicians are playing a beautiful melody, should we examine the sound they are making, we would see that it does not exist by itself. But when we're not making our formal analysis, still there's a beautiful tune to be heard, which is merely a label on notes and on players. That's why lovely music can lighten sad hearts. Thus accepting ourselves all deluded, non-virtuous actions that others have done in the past, in the present, and the future with mind, speech, and body, may the delusions of others, as well as our own, be the favored conditions to gain our enlightenment, just as the peacocks eat poison and thrive. As crows may be cured after swallowing poison by a powerful antidote given in time, let's direct to all others our virtuous merit, that this may replenish their chances for freedom. May all sentient beings reach Buddhahood soon. Janchu Sencho Rinpoche, Ma Ke Panam Ke Gyochi, Ke Pan Yampa Me Pa Yam, Gone Gondu Pawa Sho, Tony Dawa Rinpoche, Ma Ke Panam Ke Gyochi, Ke Pan Yampa Me Pa Yam, Gone Gondu Pawa Sho. So there's a lot to consider. And I really recommend going back through this text again and again. There's a lot of really beautiful commentaries on this text. Some of the ones I recommend, Geshe Nawan Darge. It's very short, really, really succinct commentary put out by the Library of Tibetan Archives. And then Mind Training, the Great Collection, has Wheel of Sharp Weapons in it, plus a whole bunch of other really good lojong texts and commentaries. And then Good Karma by Venerable Thubten Chodron, one of our very senior nuns in our tradition. It says Good Karma, it sounds like it's just about karma, but it's actually a commentary on Wheel of Sharp Weapons, a really accessible one. And then a little bit more technical, and where a lot of my presentation comes from, is Geshe Lundrup Sopa, and it's called Peacock in the Poison Grove. And so there's two texts on training the mind that have this similar iconography of the peacock in the poison grove. So those are my recommended readings. But this first one by Geshe Nawan Darge is nice and short and sweet. So it's a good one for just quickly referring, what does this verse mean? What does that verse mean? So as ever, you'll get all of those course materials from Sheila. So thank you very much to the organizers of Shantideva for making all of those accessible. And happy practicing, everybody. Is there any immediate questions? I'm guessing it'll take a little while to percolate. But if there's anything on the tip of your tongue, we've got a minute or two. Too soon? Too soon, too late. Okay, no worries. I really, really recommend that you request the teachers that come through Shantideva Center to teach on emptiness. Yeah. Bodhicitta and emptiness, bodhicitta and emptiness. And when you're tipping too much method, go wisdom. When you're tipping too much wisdom, go method, and eventually union. But particularly if you have geshes coming through, particularly the senior teachers, request them to teach on emptiness. It's so important, and it's going to be really hard for us to have progress on our path until we really get it. So keep requesting and keep coming back to it. I know it can be tricky, but don't give up. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
So that will be our next request.
Thank you very
Sorry,
much.
Sheila.
Thank
Thank you.
Wonderful
So Venerable
teaching.
Yönten, this will be our next request. Teachings on emptiness from you.
Yes, yes, please.
Sure, yeah, let's look at our schedules, but you know, it'll be a while, so get somebody else to do it in the interim. But, yeah, you guys are in my heart, and I really would love to stay connected, so I'll do my best.
Oh, good.
I know you're so busy. You're so busy. Happy Mother's Day, Venerable Yönten.
Yes,
Yeah.
others, you're
Happy
all
holiday. Happy Sakadawa coming up.
Happy Sagadawa.
Happy Sakadawa.
Happy practicing, you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.